Your phone buzzes at 9:14 in the evening on a Tuesday. Not a text from a stranger, not bad news from a hospital. Just your spouse, sitting on the other end of the couch, saying the sentence out loud instead of texting it because some sentences feel too big to type. You already knew before you knew. The 4 seconds before your brain fully processes the words are sometimes the last calm 4 seconds you get for a very long time. This is what divorce actually looks like, not the version people imagine with a single dramatic fight and a slammed door. The version where the damage doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers, one level at a time, each one waiting until the last one is finished collapsing before it starts. Nobody hands you a manual for this. There's no R department, no severance package, no exit interview explaining what you're entitled to keep. There's just a life that was built for 2 people and a version of you that has to figure out, piece by piece, which parts of it you're still allowed to want. People talk about divorce like it's one event with a before and an after, a single line you cross. It isn't. It's dozens of smaller endings stacked on top of each other, each one arriving on its own schedule, each one costing something different: money, time, friendships, the version of yourself you'd gotten used to being. Some of them announce themselves. Most of them don't, and you only recognize them afterward, once you're already standing on the other side. Day 1. The sentence. The word itself barely registers the first time it's said out loud. You nod like someone who's heard something reasonable, because your body hasn't caught up to what your ears just processed. You ask logistical questions instead of emotional ones: who's sleeping where tonight, because logistics are easier to hold than grief, and grief hasn't fully arrived yet anyway. It arrives around 2 in the morning. You don't cry the way people describe crying in movies. You just lie there doing an inventory of your own life, trying to figure out which parts of it were ever true and which parts you'd been quietly performing for years without noticing. Week 1. The telling. You have to say the sentence again, this time to other people, and every single time costs something different. Your parents ask questions you don't have answers for yet. Your closest friend goes quiet in a way that tells you she's already choosing sides, even if she doesn't say so. The hardest version is telling the kids. You've rehearsed it, softened it, agreed on the wording together like 2 people drafting a joint statement, which in a way you are. Their faces don't break the way you expected. They ask if they'll still have their own room, and something in you breaks instead, quietly, somewhere none of them can see. Month 1. The paperwork. This is the part nobody warned you about: how much of ending a marriage is administrative. Filing fees, financial disclosures. A list of every asset you've acquired together, valued and itemized like you're liquidating a small business instead of ending a life you built on purpose. You learn a new vocabulary you never wanted: discovery, petitioner, equitable distribution. Somewhere in the process, the person you loved for a decade becomes the other party on a legal document, and you sign it anyway because that's simply what the form requires. Month 2. The money. 2 incomes built 1 household. Now 1 income has to build 2, and the math never quite works no matter how many times you run it. You sit at the kitchen table doing the same calculation most nights, what you have left against what you need, and the number is always tighter than you were prepared for. You've learned not to buy anything you don't strictly need. Extra spending now is extra risk later, and risk doesn't care how carefully you've been budgeting. You start pricing apartments you'd have laughed at 5 years ago, doing the quiet math of what a person is worth on paper once you split them in half. The retirement account gets divided by a formula neither of you understands until a specialist explains it twice. The car loan, still in both names, becomes its own small negotiation. You start keeping receipts for things you never used to think twice about because somewhere down the line a lawyer might ask, and you've learned the hard way that "I don't remember" is not an answer either of you can afford anymore. Month 3. The house. Either the house sells or someone buys the other one out, and either way you spend an afternoon standing in an empty room that used to hold your whole life, deciding what's worth keeping and what simply isn't anymore. Furniture gets split the way furniture gets split, not evenly, just tolerably, item by item, until neither of you can stand negotiating over end tables any longer. You keep the couch. You've never even liked the couch. You keep it anyway because keeping something, anything, Feels like proof you're still allowed to want things. Month 4. The custody calendar. If there are kids, this is where the real architecture of your new life gets built, a color-coded calendar dictating which days you get to be a full-time parent and which days you get to be someone who used to be one. You count the days between now and the next time you'll see them, the way other people count the days until vacation. Except the math never feels like anything you'd choose. The exchanges are the hardest part. 30 seconds in a driveway, polite and practiced. An interaction that looks to anyone watching like nothing at all. Underneath it is a negotiation that never really ends: who gets which holiday, who gets the recital, who gets to be the version of parent that shows up in the good memories instead of the ones explained later in therapy. Month 5. The friends split. You find out which relationships were actually yours, and which ones were only ever shared property. People you assumed were your closest friends quietly drift toward the other side. Not out of malice, just convenience, geography, old loyalty. Keeping score out loud is a mistake you don't make twice. Resentment over friendships lost has a way of turning into bitterness you can't afford to carry alongside everything else. The friends who stay are the ones who never wasted your time asking which version of the story is true. They just show up, and that's the only thing that matters now. Month 6. The body. Sleep goes first, and nobody warns you that it's part of the cost too. You lose weight without trying or gain it without noticing, depending on which direction stress happens to push you. What sleep does come, you negotiate for instead of simply getting it. Your doctor asks if anything's changed recently, and you laugh in a way that isn't really a laugh at all. None of it is dramatic. It's just exhaustion, sustained for months at a time, until it stops feeling like a phase and starts feeling like your new baseline. Month 7. The blow-up. Mediation is supposed to be the calm room. 2 lawyers, a neutral table, a process designed specifically to keep things from turning into what they used to turn into at home. Most sessions go exactly like that: quiet, procedural, almost boring. This one doesn't. Something small sets it off. A comment about the kid's schedule that wasn't meant as an accusation but lands like one anyway. And for about 90 seconds the whole room sounds like the worst version of your marriage instead of the end of it. Your heart doesn't fully settle until you're back in the car, hands still gripping the wheel a little tighter than the drive home requires. Everyone in that room has learned to expect these 90-second collapses. Nobody's ever ready for them anyway. Month 8. The almost. There's almost always a night when the two of you talk longer than you meant to, and for a moment it feels like maybe this doesn't have to end the way the paperwork says it will. You let yourself picture it. The old house, the old version of both of you, undone. By morning, the same reasons that started this are still exactly where you left them. Nothing about the conversation changed, only the hope that briefly, uselessly, made you believe it might. That kind of hope stopped being trustworthy a while ago. It rarely survives daylight. Month 9. The name. Somewhere around now you fill out a form that asks for your marital status, and your pen hovers over the box a full second longer than it should. Divorced isn't a word you've absorbed yet, even after everything that's led to it. You check it anyway. You catch yourself introducing your own life differently, now not lying exactly, just editing. Skipping the part where you explain why you're doing this alone this year. Some days that editing feels like protection. Other days it feels like proof that you still haven't figured out who you are without the sentence that used to come before your name. Month 10. The loneliest call. Your mother calls to check in, and for 11 minutes you're not a person going through a divorce at all. You're just her child, talking about nothing, and it's the easiest conversation you've had in weeks. She doesn't know the real version: how many nights you've sat in a mostly empty apartment doing math you never wanted to learn, wondering whether you're going to be okay, or just telling yourself that until it becomes true by repetition. You hang up and sit with the quiet that follows every one of these calls. The gap between the version of you she thinks she's talking to and the person actually holding the phone. It's the loneliest 11 minutes that isn't technically lonely at all, if that makes any sense. Year 1. The math that never stops. A full year in, you sit with the total the way you sit with it most nights now. What the marriage cost you against what staying would have cost instead. What a single bad year did to a life you spent a decade building on purpose. The number is never simple, And it's never finished being calculated because grief doesn't close out like a ledger, it just gets carried forward. Some nights the number looks like relief, other nights it looks like loss with better lighting. Most nights it's both at once, which is its own specific kind of exhausting nobody warns you about in advance. Year 2. What's left? You think, some days more than others, about the version of your life where the sentence never got said at all. You've never been able to hold that thought for very long. There's always tomorrow's version of the calendar to think about instead, and tomorrow's version always wins. This is what divorce actually costs, stripped of everything the movies add to make it look like a single clean break instead of what it really is. No music behind it. No dramatic reconciliation resolved with one good conversation. Just a long list of small, exhausting losses stacked one on top of the other at every single level of a life that used to only have to answer to one plan instead of two. Nobody who goes through this thinks they'll come out the other side exactly the same person who went in. Most days, they're right. And on the days it finally stops feeling like something happening to you and starts feeling like something you actually survived, that's the only ending this particular story ever really gets. If this gave you a real look at what divorce costs, drop a comment with what stage hit hardest for you, and subscribe if you want more of these. We post a new one every week.